guys, my name is Ash, aka Tim. Thank you for clicking on this video. Honestly, thank you for taking a chance by clicking on this video and talking a little bit with me, or at least listening to me for a little bit here. This is non-gaming related. I've been covering mobile games here on YouTube for over 10 years now, and from time to time I like to make personal videos, kind of vulnerable videos like this one. Why do I do that? It's simple. I'm so lucky and so incredibly fortunate to be given this little tiny platform here on YouTube in my little niche of mobile gaming. And I feel compelled to do something a little bit greater, a little bit more with this tiny platform that I have. I'm under no illusion that the vast majority of my audience could care less about my life, about what I've been through, and about how I, got out of some of the depression and anxiety that I've dealt with throughout my life. But if only, I know it's cliche, but if only a few people out there, heck, one person out there, either right now or in the future, is able to find a little bit of hope or strength or solace or comfort in a video like this, I feel really good about it. So thank you again for taking a chance on this video. Quick disclaimer number one is I'm not a mental health expert. This is my anecdotal story, but especially as a man, I think that mental health can be stigmatized a bit among men in our society. I hope that others can, learn from my story a little bit, and 95% of my audience is men. You're likely a guy.
Well, that's good to hear.
Either way, you're welcome to listen to me. Let me dive into it. I want to share a little bit of my story, especially as it relates to my struggles in life, which were really, really acute. Heck, they still are. Like, I hate making videos like these and thinking or giving the impression that I figured it all out and I'm happy-go-lucky now, because I still struggle. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that if you're someone who is prone to mental illness or extreme volatility, mania, anything in that spectrum, it's sincerely usually a lifelong battle, right? You'll have waves. But again, I want to give you some of the strategies that I've used to combat my own waves in that regard. So starting with, I guess, everybody has these tendencies. I've always run hot and cold emotionally, right? I am, I mean, everything from like road rage to temper to love. I love hard and sometimes I hate hard, Luckily, it's never gotten me in trouble with like the law or anything like that. I've certainly not done anything that I'm like super unproud of. It's not like I have this massive skeleton in my closet, but I've got a billion stories of things that I probably should not have done, and that was because of my volatile emotions. Historically throughout my life, I've had it basically my entire life, and when times get really tough, those emotions can go totally out of check. And some of those emotions are that mania that I touched on. I can get a bit paranoid at times about people around me. But before I get to all of that, what happened to me that put me in this mental state, right? As I said, I had a pretty like normal quote unquote life, even though no life is normal. But around 14 years ago, my mother passed away, and she was, like a lot of moms out there, not every sadly, but like a lot, she was my everything. Everything maternal, everything care, everything genuine love, unadulterated love, right? Unconditional love. She embodied that. And the love of a mother, the love of the true love of a woman, she was everything to me, And she was a nurse by profession, so she was also like from a kind of quasi-hypochondriac, especially at the time in my teens and early 20s, she was also respite in that regard for me. When she passed away, it was suddenly from lung cancer, stage 4 lung cancer. From diagnosis to death, it was only a matter of months, a few months. Non-smoker, healthy person, 48 years old. It was awful and it was very tough. And I self-isolated. I was engaged with wedding like planned, and I withdrew from the wedding and I withdrew from the relationship. And then I withdrew from a lot of my friends and almost all my family. That seems like the worst thing to do when you lose somebody. But to this day, I haven't reconciled or repaired almost any of those relationships. I continue to struggle with isolation, self-imposed isolation, and I don't even know why, It's crazy. But odds are, when you go through something, like it could be a big breakup, it could be losing a job, it could be a million things, losing a loved one. It could be a personal failing in life. Everybody's different, right? And the way that things resonate and sit with us is incredibly different. I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but the odds are you're going to go through something in life that is a massive struggle. We all do. Something you're unprepared for, you feel unprepared for in the moment. It's difficult. And sometimes it can bring out the best in you, and sometimes it can bring out the worst in you. And sometimes all those idiosyncrasies that you might have had, those personality traits, they can become more acute, and they can borderline into things like depression, anxiety, and mania, or in my case, like isolation on top of that, right? So I started to isolate, and I started YouTube, right? That's when I started YouTube. I started to focus on one thing and fixate on one thing to distract myself. All of my time and energy went into that, at the expense of everybody in my life for the most part, you know? Couple exceptions, but for the most part, that's when I really started to isolate, really. And then my brother passed away 7 years ago. My younger brother, Sean, 28 years old. He had autism. He was like a 4-year-old in a 28-year-old's body. And I was a friend, a brother, and a caretaker to him. And he was a big part of my identity as well, you know? And when I lost him, he was 28, like I said, when he passed away. And he was just the best little guy. He had that naivete of a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, but in an adult body. And it was something that like, it went from being, oh man, it stinks that my bro's like that. And like when I was growing up, and it went from being something that was such a blessing in my life. You know, I learned to continuously through my entire adulthood, because it was 28 years with Sean, to find joy out of the most menial things at times, like a little kid does, you know? But that was a constant reminder to stay connected with what truly matters in this world, not all the superficial shit that's constantly being shoved down our throats, you know? I grew up not super poor, but kind of poor, you know? We barely could afford to rent our house in the middle of a meh area growing up. And after that, I just couldn't afford to have like the Nintendo or whatever, you know, any of that stuff. So I knew what was it like. And, you know, into my 20s as well, I knew what it was like to struggle in terms of economically. And then when I was lucky enough to have a bit of a better income where I didn't have to struggle and worry about next paycheck or anything like that, it took that for me to realize that money just, I mean, it's cliche to say, and only people with money tend to say this, but money doesn't bring happiness outside the necessities, you know?
You just emotional.
At least that's been my experience, because my happiness level certainly hasn't gone up at all, you know, during when I've been fortunate enough to make more money in life, you know? And I learned that, you know, after buying a bunch of stuff, material stuff, you know, new designer clothes or a really expensive car and all that stuff, it was very temporary, the happiness. It's when you want to pay for things, pay for moments and memories, people you love. And for the love of God, don't go to a concert or a show and record the entire thing. Experience it and live in the moment. That's what I learned, you know, during this time period, because I tried all the distractions after Sean passed away, and none of them worked, you know, none of them worked. But I did continue to self-isolate, and I continued to get more and more manic. In my mind, I was analyzing everything and everyone. I have this, even alone in my room at night, in my bedroom or whatever, I would just sit there and think and almost make up people who hated me in my life. And none of it was true. But I would just tell myself these stories constantly over and over. This is why you're this way, Tim. This is why you're that way, Tim. This is why you can't succeed here. This is why you can't succeed there. Oh, you ruin relationships. You can't be in a relationship. You know, you're not smart enough to own a business or to run it successfully up to be a $20 million company or a $100 million company. You're not smart enough. You lack the education to do X, Y, or Z. I would tell myself all these stories all the time. And I started weaving this narrative that brought me into a greater and deeper pit of despair in my life. And eventually, I just had these moments of waking up, just at least momentarily, and asking myself, like, what am I doing? What am I? Who have I become? Who have I become? And I realized that I needed to change a lot in my life. Sure, I lost 2 very dear family members. I've dealt with other struggles, but I also had a lot to be grateful for in life. You know, I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and I found that people, even in a concentration camp, could find joy in companionship and camaraderie and a reason to live and purpose. If they could find that, how come I couldn't? There's no reason. I had to stop wallowing in self-pity and stop caring so much about what everybody thought about me all the time. If I knew that I was doing the right thing and I had good intentions, that has to be good enough. That has to be good enough. Otherwise, you're gonna drive yourself crazy. Gonna drive yourself insane. So owning and reshaping these self-narratives was a huge part of me getting on better footing in my life journey. You know, you have to stop telling yourself what you can and can't do, who you are. It could be something as menial as public speaking. I can't public speak. I don't want to say that. I can't do that. That's not me. That's one of my weaknesses. That's a story that you've been probably telling yourself for years and years and years, and it becomes fact because ultimately our life is the story that we tell ourselves. We get to decide who we are. We get to decide what our strengths and weaknesses are. And if you tell yourself the same thing over and over and over again, you might say, Ash, I don't do that, man. I don't do that. You do. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. Just got to tell yourself the right story. How do you do that? By doing it little baby steps at a time, right? Start to tell yourself good things about yourself. It sounds stupid and it feels dumb when you start, but I promise you'll start to weave a new narrative because the human subconscious is extremely powerful, way more powerful than we give it credit for. Free will, I think, is a thing, but not as big of a thing as a lot of people think it is. A lot of it is everything we consume, our output, aka what we think in our mind. That's not the full story, you know? It's not always our thoughts. It's the stories that we're trying to tell ourselves because humans are storytellers. We want to make sense of things that oftentimes we just can't understand. Tell yourself a positive story. Have confidence in yourself. If you're like me, where you always think the worst all the time, keep yourself in check and have faith in your decision process. Have faith in what you say and what you do. Whether it's cringy or stupid, you're going to be wrong. People make mistakes. We should be more forgiving in society. Not everybody's canceled, not just publicly, but privately. But we're telling ourselves the wrong story. So take ownership because you can make a difference in your own life, in your own story. Number 2 is find a purpose, right? Now, purpose, it sounds so woo-woo and ambiguous, but find a task and do it immediately. It can be super simple, right? Starting positive rituals and routines in your day is always going to lead to a positive outcome because the habit forming process of having healthy rituals, it can be like flossing once a day or whatever. If you start to snowball these positive rituals and you're able to be consistent and power through the difficult times when you're like, I'll just let it go for one day. If you can be consistent with small little changes, then you'll teach yourself to be consistent with bigger changes in your life. Start small. Also, learn. Never stop learning. I had this stupid thing in my head after I graduated from college, or actually graduated from high school, dropped out of college. I'm sorry for the Freudian slip there, but I had this stupid thing in my head, like why should I learn about stuff? I'm not gonna get a diploma. What a dumb thing to think. That's how I thought back then. What's the point in learning?
Who needs it? Look at me. Look at me.
I don't even know why I thought that, but I did. And I became such an uninteresting person for that period of my life. I was never learning anything. All my verbal output was just menial things about my life or gossip or whatever it may be. And that's not who I want to be. I want to always be curious. Cultivate curiosity in your life and you'll be happier for it. Now, obviously, there's low-hanging fruit here. Meditating. One word on meditation. Everybody says, meditation. It's the one thing that's proven to cure or solve or mitigate depression and anxiety. I found the same thing to be true personally in my life. But the one thing they didn't tell me is it takes a long time. I stuck with meditation for over a year. It wasn't until maybe 6 to 9 months during COVID that I actually started to notice a positive mental change in my life. I recommend Headspace. 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day even. And I like taking the courses like Finding Focus and Happiness. I like the visualization exercises, but it's not going to happen overnight. And you're going to feel, especially if you're new to meditation, you're going to feel stupid and silly and whatever, but just try it. Try to be consistent if you can. Because if you can, I mean, there is endless, like, legitimate medical literature on it being incredibly effective for mental health. So, I mean, don't believe me, believe the experts on this, right? Tons of it. So consider meditation, right? Consider like little things like deep breaths. But once you meditate for long enough, I do find that it helps you to really, you can kind of channel that zone of meditation throughout your day-to-day life. And that's when you know it's working. For me, that's how I knew, whoa, I'm thinking about what I felt when I was meditating. That's when I knew that, wow, it's actually working, which is pretty shocking to me because I was pretty skeptical early on. Finding a task, right? Not just learning and being curious, which is great, but also like build something. For, you know, do an art project, whatever it may be. Everybody's different. I can't tell you what to do. Learn an instrument. Try a craft or a project or remodel your house. And I think that it's one of these things that in all of our minds is like, yeah, I'll probably do that next week or when I can afford to do X, Y, or Z. But the truth is you can do it now. Take steps immediately. There's no time like right now. Otherwise, you're probably not going to do it, right? So I like staying busy. Just don't do it so much that you're negating everything else in your life like I did, right? And then the last thing is, and I touched on this, but let go of your fear of judgment from others. Be yourself. Because, I mean, it's cliche and you've probably heard it a million times before, but who wants to be around people that don't even know the real you or value the real you? You could be silly, you could be corny, you could be vulnerable, could be emotional, could be stoic. I don't know who you are, but don't be afraid to be yourself. F anybody out there who's going to call anybody cringe, right? Or anything like that, you know, or going to judge you. Be your true self. Be your true self and be content in that. Because when you're your true self and when you're content in that and when you don't care what other people think so much about you and you care more about what you think of you, that's when things will start turning around for you. Listen, guys, this journey is not a straight line, right? It's gradual. Think small victories. There's going to be ups and downs. I lost these loved ones, but then I found hope and I found the most amazing thing in my life in my son, Charlie. I didn't even think I would ever be a dad, but I had the most amazing little boy who's changed everything about my life. But I didn't know that when I was in the car outside a Target parking lot, outside of Boston, the day after my brother died, trying to overdose on over-the-counter medication. I didn't know I would have a son in a couple years who would change everything about everything in my entire life. And to be robbed of that moment would have been such a massive injustice in my life. It would have been the most cruel thing I could have ever done to myself, but I didn't know it at that moment. I didn't know it in my lowest low that my highest high was yet to happen. As hard or difficult as that was to envision at the time. Listen, for anybody out there that's thinking about harming themselves or ending it all, or even flirting with the idea that I might be better off dead, remember that you're robbing your future self. You're robbing the little kid version of you, the most innocent version of you, a chance at a new high that, as unlikely as it may seem, could be around the corner for you. So guys, again, I really hope that somebody out there can either heal or be healed in the future by some of the words and experiences that I shared with you guys. Either way, I love you and I care about you. I appreciate you guys taking time to watch me and content here on YouTube, even if you only watch this video. I really do appreciate it because, again, time is the most valuable resource out there in life, and I really appreciate you guys spending a little bit of it with me. Much love, and as always, take care, guys.